American teachers abroad. What is the craziest thing your students thought was true about Americans? When I was teaching in Spain, I introduced myself to the class and told them I'm from Miami. I hear a kid shout out in Spanish, "Wow, how is this guy alive?" CSI Miami, Dexter, Miami Vice, and Florida Man have really corrupted foreigners' views of my city. I was presenting an exhibition in Shanghai of about 95% Chinese people, and a young woman came up and asked me where I was from. I am white with brown hair and eyes. When I said I was American, she looked baffled and responded, "But don't all Americans have blue eyes?" A lot of people also think that all Americans are fat and tall. It's a bit more understandable when the person is old. An old man in Shanghai Park asked where I was from, and when I said the US, he hollered, "Then how are you so short? I'm just over 5'2". American in South Korea here. Have been asked by co-workers if high schools really have vending machines full of birth control pills. Also, if I know any cowboys, not the football team, and if I have a gun back home. Students ask me if I know Obama. Same kids yell, "Obama!" anytime they see a black person in their books or in a video. We're working on that. At my high school, I was the immigrant mediator who would teach newly arrived Russian and Ukrainian immigrants, and sometimes Jamaican and Haitian immigrants, English, and assimilate them into American society. This was in southern Brooklyn, where there were thousands of Russian immigrants coming in during the early 2000s every year. I was picked for the Russians mostly because I was from Chechnya and knew Russian. The biggest thing they would ask is how did they start with dealing drugs, joining gangs, and where is the nearest gun store. They came from places with atrocious crime, and often they were criminals, and they probably heard about America's drug and gang problems and thought they could make a better living doing that in America. They had watched movies like The Godfather, or even stuff like Menace II Society, and thought America was this badass outlaw land, when in reality their countries were a ton worse. Many of them came during the 2000s, during the early Putin era, when crime was dropping fast and it became harder to be a criminal in Russia. But many were shocked that NYC was not the crime-filled nation it was back in the 1980s and 1990s. Hi, welcome to Brooklyn. I'm Willmaster123. I'll be your immigrant mediator. Here's the steps to get your FID card and a list of local gun stores. Here's the common application to fill out for the Bloods, Crips, and all the other major gangs in the area. Here's the list of gangs who are hiring and positions they are trying to fill. As an immigrant myself, I would be wary of letting my handlers know that I intended to involve myself as a criminal in the country I was moving into. They asked me to explain what white trash meant, and then they got confused when I said that it didn't apply to black people. A friend of mine did a few years teaching in South Korea, and every new class he taught, there was always at least one kid who would ask him if he knew Leonardo DiCaprio. They were always so disappointed when he said no. When I was teaching English in Japan, I had a 15-year-old girl ask me if I saw everything in blue because my eyes are blue. I almost laughed, but she was dead serious, and everyone else looked at me expectantly while waiting for the answer. Not a specifically American stereotype, but similarly indicative of an insulated culture. Which actually reminds me, I also had an ethnically Japanese co-worker who had grown up in Las Vegas, but who also spoke Japanese. His students often refused to believe he was American. They thought it was some elaborate ruse. A guy I knew when I lived in Central America asked if there was time to get out of the way of the snow. Upon questioning, it turned out that he thought that snow fell all at once. Foomph, like a big blanket. Had some family come up from Mexico to visit for Christmas. It snowed and they all ran out to play in it, then quickly ran back inside. They were shocked at how cold it was, like they didn't think they needed gloves and jackets to have a snowball fight. My cousin said, "We knew it would be cold, but we didn't think it would be that cold." I got a few surprised looks when I told students we didn't sleep with our shoes on. Taught in Spain for a bit, I was asked multiple times what kind of machine gun I owned. I swear, if anyone else stereotypes us Americans as gun-toting hicks, I'm gonna take my M16 to their city and see what they call us then. First question was where I'm from. Detroit. Subsequent questions asked in no certain order. Do you have black friends? Have you shot someone? Do you own a gun? Yes, no, no. I'm skeptical. Real Americans are taken to Walmart at birth. where they are issued a firearm, a six-pack of Bud Light, and a Republican voter registration. Are you sure you're an American? An exchange student from Italy was disappointed when he came to Colorado and attacks by Native American tribes weren't a regular thing anymore. I was teaching elementary school in Seoul. The day's lesson was about asking people what they ate for various meals. Kimchi is eaten at every meal in Korea pretty much, and I asked one of the students if he gets tired of eating kimchi. He says, "It's okay. You don't get tired of eating hamburgers at every meal, right?" As a note, I am very thin. I'm trying to think of an actual equivalent for America, but I don't think anybody eats anything as frequently as Koreans eat kimchi. Other commenters sure have a lot of opinions on the matter, though 80% of them do appear to be either cheese, bread, or potatoes. My students seemed pretty shocked I didn't personally know Obama. Also, they call every black guy Obama and every black girl Beyoncé. Interesting that we now have multiple cases of this being a thing in foreign countries. First question asked was if I'd ever shot anybody, then asked if I owned a gun. Then they seemed skeptical that I was American at all. This is second-hand, but Mark Salzman's non-fiction book, partly about teaching in China in the 80s, Iron and Silk, had some doozies in it. A grown man asked him if the rumor he heard about America was true, that we had machines that did our work for us that looked like people, but occasionally went rogue and hurt people. I think someone heard about the Terminator and played telephone with it, is the only explanation I've got. Or perhaps Blade Runner. I teach in the Middle East, and one of my students was legitimately scared of gay people in America because he thought they were aggressive. Like they would pull you from a car and assault you aggressive. Just a lot of scary, weird misconceptions about gay people. When I was mentoring university students in Kyrgyzstan through the US Embassy Outreach Program, they thought The Bachelor was how we actually dated in the US. I taught high school English in France. Some sample questions from the students. How many donuts do you eat per week? How many celebrities have you met? They were under the impression that celebrities were just walking around all over the place and around every corner, in a country of 300 million. How many guns do you own? Do you really only drink from red cups at parties? Does everyone drive a big car, like a Hummer? How many times a day do you eat McDonald's? Why does everyone in America go to church? How many gangs are there in your city? The only cities in the US that actually mattered to them were New York, Las Vegas, and Miami. I worked in Korea for several years. Occasionally my work group would go out for pizza or steak dinners, or something like that. Several of them would admit to me that even after scarfing down an appetizer, a salad, a bowl of soup, a massive steak, 2 sides, and several glasses of beer, they would go home and have rice and kimchi, because they hadn't yet had a meal. Apparently, you are not a good Korean unless you have rice and kimchi at least 3 times a day. One of them would often bring me bread. Later, they would ask how the bread was. It started to seem like all our conversations revolved around bread. I asked one guy about this once. He said, "That's what foreigners always eat, right?" It seemed that they were inferring that since they had to eat rice and kimchi 3 times a day, there must be some American equivalent, and since Americans never eat rice, it must be bread. Minds were blown when I told them that I do sometimes eat rice at home, or potatoes, or bread, or pasta. I taught English in China for a while back when I was in high school. They thought all white guys could surf, shoot a gun, and walked around without a shirt. All white girls had huge chests and were very stupid. All black people were drug users. The European fascination with our use of red Solo cups as the sole way of imbibing never ceases to amuse me. I'm from Ireland, but I lived in Ohio for a year. I too found Solo cups and school buses an extreme novelty. I enjoyed the portion sizes too. I pay once and get 2 meals out of it. Mostly, the biggest thing I was taken back by was seeing American military vehicles and soldiers in person for the first time. I've traveled a lot and big into journalism, so I follow international relations and current affairs quite a bit. But it never dawned on me that I'd basically seen saturation coverage of American soldiers in films, video games, and on the news, Afghanistan, Iraq, but never in person. I kind of weirdly had a bit of a starstruck reaction when I saw soldiers at an airport or Humvees traveling between bases. Besides being asked if Americans shower with their shoes on in order to keep them clean enough to wear in the house, I've had to keep a straight face when a barely 5-foot skinny Japanese girl asks me if she seriously had a chance to be a big black rapper's hoe upon graduation if she went to college in the US. Other noteworthy ones were an adult student whose mind was blown when I told her that we have sewing needles. She thought they were a Japanese-only thing, and a kindergarten teacher who didn't know that cat's cradle string games were known outside of Japan. Studied abroad in Japan, and people were surprised that my English was so fluent. I'm a white Australian. Many of us in English-speaking countries would also attest that when a certain amount of Aussie slang is involved, it nearly becomes another language. No shame on the Japanese for thinking this. I'm in a small town in northern Italy, and my students are baffled by the fact that I don't go to church. I taught English in France for a year. One day, one of the kids made a comment about seeing me out running over the weekend. The kid sitting next to him goes, "Well, how did you see her if she lives in America?" The teacher was like, "Wait, what?" Turns out this one kid thought I flew home to the US every day. This was a 4th grader. I'm an American in Europe who TAs, and most things are from movies. Super unsafe, callous people, everyone has a gun, women sleep with anything that moves, etc. When I ask, say, a German if I should then base my opinions on how they are shown in movies, I get a look of horror followed by one of understanding my point. Wait, you mean all Germans aren't lederhosen-wearing, beer-drinking yodelers? No, that's Bavaria. It's the Texas of Germany. Not a teacher, but I'm from Tornado Alley, and a group of students in New Zealand ask me, "How do you get to school? Aren't there just tornadoes everywhere? It must be so scary." Apparently they thought that there are tornadoes everywhere all the time, and you just drive on the road like, "Oh look, there's 3 tornadoes out today." Not just an American thing, but one of my teachers was in the Peace Corps back in the day and went to the Philippines. She said that all the kids thought that snow grew on trees because the only snow they'd ever seen was in pictures. Women sleep with anything that moves. This is an American stereotype? I thought we were looked on as prudes in Europe. Ethiopian children didn't believe I was American because I'm not blonde. Black people are made of chocolate. I almost didn't want to correct them. They prefer the term delicious Americans. Introducing myself to my middle schoolers in France. "Where are you from?" "I'm American." But you are not fat?" I was asked, "Why is most of the world America?" Me, "Huh? What do you mean?" "You know, North America, South America, Central America, Latin America, United States of America." He was from a very small place in South America, so he scrounged up a world map and talked about it for a few hours. A kid asked where my gun was and if my horse was outside. One of the takeaways from the other stories seems to be just how many people outside of America think that GTA is a depiction of everyday American life. It's just so nice to see someone base their image off Red Dead Redemption instead. I work in the Middle East, and I got a lot of casual N-word dropping, I think because the students hear it in gangster movies and pop culture, and think it's just commonplace. They have no idea that it's even slightly taboo. I tried to argue one day, and a student pointed out that Snoop Dogg said it about someone else, so why can't he? Says something about our culture, I guess. I am not a teacher, however my brother is over in Germany. He told me that he went to a skate park and got thirsty, so walked to the snack bar area to get a water. My brother, "Hey, could I get a water please?" Snack guy hands him the water. No, here it's free. My brother, "I appreciate that, but I would like to pay." Snack guy, "No, it's free. See, I'm not a Nazi." My brother, "Oh no, I wasn't implying that you were." Long story short, apparently some German people think that they are all Nazis still. I taught a few English lessons in China while I was working there, and was surprised that only a few minutes into my first lesson, there was a widespread gasp when I began writing basic phrases on the board. Several hands shot up into the air immediately, and I quickly realized that everyone's question was how long it took me to train myself to write with my left hand. The average age in the class was probably 35, and all had thus come from a generation where they were forcibly taught to write with their right hands, even if they were natural lefties like myself. Not quite to the point of this thread, but it sure was interesting. My mother taught in Australia from 1979 to 1986. Her students found the way she pronounced things strange at times, but other than that, nothing weird. The students just accepted she was American like a lot of the people they saw on TV. She said the adults were worse. My mother is African American, so she had to deal with racists. My uncle called her a Negro until my father told him to stop. She also dealt with some guy on the street who called her a bloody Negro when he bumped her car with his car. My father was with her and instructed her on how to insult him, so she pokes her head out of the car and calls the guy an effing wog. Having an African American woman yell that at him caught him off guard, so he shut up and drove away. Also, a lot of the Australians my mother interacted with found her natural hair very, very interesting. I taught English in China for a summer. One of the Chinese teachers, a college graduate, told me that China is vastly more ethnically diverse than America because, in America, you only have white people and black people. I wasn't teaching, but while traveling I was asked by some school kids from London to confirm that it's illegal to talk in elevators in the States, especially New York City. From New York, can confirm. Not a teacher, but did do volunteer work in a lot of other countries. How I disappointed people in various parts of the world. I did not know Britney Spears, Chile. I could not take them with me to adopt, Brazil. I was not fat or stupid, Germany. I could speak Spanish, Spain and Chile. No, I am not super easy and will not have adult fun times with you, Iraq. I don't own any guns and do in fact know my way around international politics, Netherlands. I'm actually an atheist, also Netherlands. Canadian in Japan. When I worked at junior high school, one of my co-workers thought all North Americans just don't eat fish, or rice, ever, at all. He was shocked when I told him I ate fish and rice all the time as a kid. I'm pretty sure he thought it was just an Asian thing. My sister went on exchange in Germany for a semester last year. Someone asked her if all Californians surfed to school. My kids here in Korea were shocked when I told them I couldn't remember my blood type, because pretty much everyone here knows theirs, and it's supposedly related to personality traits. I told them that blood type isn't really that important to Americans, and they didn't seem to believe it. While teaching 4th graders how to tell time, they told me that they go to bed anywhere between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m., and they definitely didn't believe me when I said that 4th graders in America go to bed earlier than that. To them, I guess kids everywhere are sleep-deprived. Also, a 3rd grader once asked me why I'm so dark. I'm mixed black and white. Not a teacher, but I had a friend in Germany while I took German. We exchanged papers and edited them for each other for our foreign language class. Apparently, her English teacher said that all American schools start at 9 in the morning. I lived in a rural area at the time where we started at 7:30. It took her a while to believe me. I taught in Mexico for a brief period of time. Here were a few of the odd misconceptions. My students couldn't believe that I grew up without a maid and that I had to work through high school and college. They thought that even the poorest people lived in nice houses and owned laptops, smartphones, nice cars, etc. They didn't seem to believe that food insecurity and extreme poverty existed in the US. Thanks to Hollywood's racist portrayal of black Americans, my students seemed to share the idea that most black Americans were gun-toting thugs. Some of them even said they would run the other way if they saw a black person walking down the street. None of them had ever seen or met a black person in their life. I did my best to convey that this was in no way true. Another weird thing was that my Mexican roommates would yell at me if I walked around our apartment barefoot. They told me that I would catch a cold by walking around without socks or shoes on. Apparently, my American friends were also told this by their host families and roommates. Been at my best friend's Mexican grandma's house quite a lot. Socks are required footwear at all times or else we'll die. I'm Russian. We'll get cold if I walk around without socks. We'll get cold feet with socks. I'm in Japan. Had an educated, middle-aged guy tell me he thought it was strange that we traditionally used pumpkins during Halloween. I asked him why he thought that. He goes, "It must be very expensive." I'm like, why? Because it must be expensive importing all those pumpkins from Japan. Dude thought all the world's pumpkins came from Japan. When I tried to convince him otherwise, he didn't believe me, until I asked him where he got his pumpkins. When he told me he got his from Yamanaka grocery store, I was like, we pick ours from the ground. He was still skeptical. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.